The Going to College Education Podcast, in association with Quality and Qualifications Ireland, QQI, promoting quality and accountability in Irish education and training.
Hello and welcome to the Going to College podcast with me, Ola Majekodunmi, in association with QQI. This two-part series will help you to prepare for a busy few weeks ahead as you weigh up your college choices and get ready for an exciting life in college. For this, the second episode, we're discussing how to make the most of your college years, what you can expect on campus, COVID rules and regulations, as well as some practical tips and advice to experiencing everything that college has to offer. And I'm delighted to be joined by Clare Austick, President of the USI, Nóirín Deady, first year experience coordinator at UCC, Scott Ahearn, student counsellor with TU Dublin, and Dr. Padraig Walsh, CEO of QQI. You're all very welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much for having us.
And Clare, in terms of the USI, what information do they have for students that students can get some advice on this about maybe changing their course?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first of all, if a student listening is having concerns around their course, about the workload, not settling in, if it's a large undenominated course and being surrounded by lots of people and just finding it hard to integrate and settle, we would definitely recommend the student to get in touch with their students' union, just to have a chat about it, but also their lecturer, just to make sure that it is actually the course that they might not necessarily like, rather than the whole transition and integration process, because it can be quite overwhelming and difficult, and particularly the next couple of weeks are going to be so stressful and highly pressurized and demanding with finding accommodation by that short turnaround period from getting the CAO offer to attending college. So it is going to be a little bit of a stressful period. So it's just about settling in, taking time, engaging in the clubs and societies and all the great things that college life has to offer to ensure that it's the course that a student might be finding difficult rather than the whole college experience. There is the date of the 31st of October that if they have any difficulties or they do want to have an internal transfer and change course, or if they want to maybe withdraw from the whole college for a year and maybe take a step back and work, or take time out to reevaluate what they maybe want to do down the line, that is the option to ensure that they don't lose any of their finances as well.
And looking into the whole idea of settling in, first year students, it can be daunting, starting at college. In terms of mental health, how important is this for students, Scott?
Yeah, no, thanks, Ola. And mental health is, kind of the emotions and the experiences and the transitioning that people will be having at this moment. It's going to be plus and minuses for individuals when they're listening to this. But I think it's important to relay that minding your mental health, practicing good mental health can have a connection to your college performance. So those are kind of one important piece. So it's also important to just mention that mental health in itself is a spectrum. So we all move from maybe from good places to bad places. That's normal. It's when the bad places may impact on us attending college, not being able to do a class presentation, feeling overwhelmed by an assignment and not submitting stuff and ignoring, maybe hiding. That's where it can get problematic for individuals when they're attending college, where it's really important that we would be saying is that to keep a little check-in for these young adults and also mature students and students of different backgrounds, that to keep a check-in, link in with a support service. And I think it's really interesting when we're just talking just a moment ago there about, deferring or that. There is a huge knowledge base within student support services and the students' union across the college. And it's really important for a student to really have a name or staff member or some link to the inside track within their own home college, because that individual can point them in the right direction, where sometimes it can be a little bit of a maze and that can feel overwhelming. But once you make a connection to one person, staff, in that capacity, they'll be able to help to kind of guide them and kind of bring them out. And there's loads of supports as well. It's really important for students when they're starting this college to use their voices and, to send that email, pop into the offices. We're going to see a lot more face-to-face interaction happening, which is really positive and holding a very optimistic outlook for the semester ahead and for the year ahead. So that's just a little bit about and the mental health. And it's also normal that people are going to experience low mood, anxiety, and a transition from secondary school, where one of the big pieces with college is the word independent self-learning. So there's a lot of responsibility that you yourself may have to, get to college, and organize yourself and work with the timetables. But there's people there to help assist on that transition too. So just to kind of offer and say that.
I think just on that point, could I come in on that? I think sometimes, I suppose with this day and age, a lot of people are familiar with the term of like mental health and well-being, but it's worth noting that, every single person has mental health, and it fluctuates depending on the interactions that we have, the conversations that we have, the people around us, and I suppose the stress and pressure of daily life as well, and the lifestyle that we have. So I think it's important if students can, reflect on how they're doing, and if they notice that maybe over a prolonged period of time that they're feeling a little bit unwell or very stressed or a bit anxious about things coming up, that they know that there are the supports out there, counselling services, there's lots of different supports on campuses that students can avail of, and I think it's just about acknowledging when the time might be needed to do something about it.
I just think Claire's making a really good point that's important to mention, is that it doesn't have to be a crisis. It's also important to go early, because we can prevent a crisis as well. And that could be through academic student supports and the many services that Claire just mentioned as well.
Padraig, I suppose it's not just students that will be dealing with change. Tutors and lecturers also will be dealing with teaching differently in the current circumstances we're in, won't they?
They will. And I think one of the things we should have learned from last year is that we shouldn't pretend that we know exactly how it's going to work. I think there were big promises last year. There was a real sense that people were going to spend a significant amount of time on campus. And ultimately, the public health and what happened meant we couldn't do that. Now, obviously, there's been a lot more planning has been done this year. And I think, Oli, you make a very good point there. It's not just change for the students, it's change for staff as well. But I don't think we will see or ever see a reversion back to exactly the way things were done before. And I think that's because we've learned from what's happened over the past number of years. For some people, the experience of college in a remote environment actually allowed people to go to college who couldn't have gone to college otherwise, who would have had, child rearing responsibilities or caring responsibilities and wouldn't have been able to do that. On the other hand, I think it'll make the institutions and the students reflect on what is it exactly that we're bringing people in for. There have to be good reasons to do it. For instance, we're not going to be able, even at this stage, to have the full large lecture because we're not imposing conditions where everybody has to be vaccinated. But I think a lot of students will have questioned whether having 500 people in the lecture theatre was ever really a good use of people's time. And I think the idea that people will be able to, replay lectures or go back on stuff is something that should work its way through. So I think there will be big differences, but I think they will play out over time because we don't really know what way this is going to end. But I think it should make us value the on-campus experience and the things, and I don't think you can undervalue that. Just on a personal anecdote, my own daughter graduated last week and graduated in person. But it was the first time she had seen her classmates for nearly 2 years because she'd been on Erasmus. And it made a huge difference to them to be able to interact with their peer group. And I think that's the one thing that people, particularly undergraduates, will feel they've really missed out on. But I think we want to maximise that, but to do things that really it is beneficial, such as tutorials, for instance, or meeting with your tutor, where in person is probably quite useful. But I think things will be different. I think it's really a case of no going back. I'm not sure we'll ever go back to the way things were 2 or 3 years ago.
Moving on to the financial aspect of student life, which we all know can be quite costly. Nóirín, if people have to pay additional fees for leaving their course early, how does that work? And how do students go about that?
Are you saying that if a student will say withdrew last year, or stayed for the whole year and they're joining a new program this year?
Yeah,
okay. Well, okay, thank you. Yes, well, they will be liable to pay the tuition fees for the year. So the fees are broken down, by tuition fee, by the capitation fee and the student contribution fee. Now, the student contribution fee, every student pays, that's €3,000 per year, unless they have a SUSI grant, and €130 capitation fee. But if they are repeating the year, then they, on top of that, they pay tuition fees. And the tuition fees depend on the course that they're studying. For example, an arts course, the tuition fees for an arts course might be close to €5,000 in UCC anyway, that is. And then maybe for a science course, it might be close to €7,000. So it depends on which course the student is studying. But yes, it's very costly to repeat the year. But then once that student progresses to the next year, then it's the free fees kick in again.
Claire, we know accommodation is in a crisis right now for students. What are the best tips you can give to students out there that are struggling to find accommodation, particularly if they're moving up to Dublin or they're moving to another county away from home?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. This is a huge topic at the moment that everyone is seeing in the newspapers, on the radio. This is something that we're obviously very strong on as well. But it must be noted that we've been in a housing crisis for the last decade. This isn't just as a result of the pandemic, but the pandemic certainly hasn't alleviated the pressure that the housing crisis was under, that we see now. So for students, for first year students who only got their offers yesterday, and they're, thinking if they're going to take their second or third option or whatever choice that they were given, and they haven't paid a deposit, or they haven't anticipated getting a certain accommodation, it's important for them to get in touch with their college to see if the college has any spots for the accommodation that they own to be put on a waiting list. There'll be some people who might be taking a year out, or who will defer the year, who might not need the accommodation on or off campus, then also putting themselves on the waiting list for the affiliated student accommodation provider complexes. And then if that also doesn't work, to look on the different websites like daft.ie, let.ie, rent.ie. Some of the newspapers will have advertisements as well, and then there's some like social media platforms as well where people tweet about certain things or put stuff up on their stories. But it is a very difficult time for people in relation to accommodation and the search for student accommodation. And I think on that point, it needs to be said that the government needs to provide capital grants to colleges to be able to build their own student accommodation, whether it's on campus or off campus, which in turn will somewhat regulate the market as well and reduce the cost in the area. So that's something that we would love to see in the near future.
So I was just going to just add in another piece just to tag team with Claire on this, is that some of the colleges, or most of the colleges, do have accommodation services, and also in the students' unions. So they're really, really helpful to navigate and to access those. And it's also important as well for students and for families just to be aware about the public transport routes to the college, which can also help increase the space to which you are looking for the accommodation. So obviously there's particular types of transports within Dublin that allow someone maybe live a little bit further out that could perhaps find, if they find where the bus routes and the Lewises or the darts are going. So it's just important just to be creative and also explore and really maximize the opportunities, and also to look at private rental, digs, other kind of methods of student accommodation as well that could be helpful, just to mention that.
And Padraig, as a parent yourself, how would you say to parents maybe listening that are trying to deal with the transition of their children moving on to college, what tips would you give them? What would your advice be to these parents?
Don't listen to parents, probably. Children are very good at that, in my experience. I mean, it is a transition, but I think the group of students that are going into college now are probably among the most resilient we've had. I've had the most appalling last 2 years. Those that have done, the leaving and have been used to their whole world changing around them, their social space, how they, living in an environment of going into, masked accommodation or masked, systems and over time. So, I mean, I think, these people have proved themselves to be much more adaptable in terms of what I'm doing. I think the other colleagues here would have a better idea of how to prepare those things.
Yeah, just following on from Padraig there, I think that the students are very resilient now. They've experienced disruption, uncertainty, and isolation at a scale unknown to students who went before them. And they have experienced the absence of milestone events as well. And their world contracted over the past 2 years instead of expanding. So, we have to be very mindful of that as well. And I think that, they've just shown their resilience.
And Nóirín, as well as your role as a UCC first year coordinator as well, how do you help students? How is your role important to incoming students?
Okay, well, first of all, I organise transition events for students. So, for example, over the past 2 weeks, I've organised tours or the peer support leaders really have given tours to second year students, and they'll start their tours next year for the first year students. We've also organised an event on campus on the 11th of September, that's next Saturday, for our second year students, because they've missed the opportunity of, that milestone event of getting themselves on campus and meeting friends and just finding their way around the place. So, and then we're also organising an event on the 25th, the Freshers Festival on the 25th of September. So we're organising lots of events. So I'm responsible for those events, supporting students in transition, but also throughout the year. My background is in guidance and counselling and cognitive behavioural therapy, and coaching. So I meet students on a one-to-one and support them, whether it's, personal or academic. But there are myriads of supports, as Clare has already referred to, in every campus to support our students to navigate their way through the first year in particular. So we front load our support services.
And Clare, for students who struggle to settle into a new life and maybe you're struggling to make friends, what would your tips be for them in terms of getting used to this change?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first of all, there's lots of different clubs and societies that students can engage in and participate in, and even different things that they might never have experienced or tried before. College is the real opportunity to try new things, to meet people from different backgrounds, to widen your horizon, to have the discussions that inform your thinking. College life just presents so many incredible opportunities, and it's about engaging. But if anyone listening is having difficulty settling in, you can reach out to the clubs and societies, attend a couple of events, and reach out to the Students' Union as well. They might have different events and activities going on. There's different supports. There's academic supports around tutorials and all of that as well. The emotional support with the counselling services. Some colleges have health units on campus, a mental health nurse, GPs, and then you also have financial supports as well around the student assistance fund, or local hardship funds, or emergency funds. So again, there's lots of supports out there that can help you, whether it's emotional, financial, academic. But I think the main thing in terms of settling in, it's allowing yourself time. It might not necessarily be the easiest thing the first week or the second week. It might take a month or two. And it's just about allowing yourself to settle in, and everyone's on their own time scale. But college life is one of the most incredible experiences that young people can engage in. It's about learning, it's about meeting new people, it's about learning and thinking about new ways and being creative. And even when I just think back to my college days, my first week in college, I remember being able to walk into a lecture hall with a little coffee. You're not having to ask permission to go to the bathroom, or being able to meet your friends in between tutorials and sit in the canteen. These are just small things, but it's so different to secondary school. And the amount of potential and opportunities that students can avail of and try, it's just absolutely phenomenal. So giving it time, trying the different things, exploring the options and the support services that are there, and then seeing what works best for you.
I'd like to bring you here as well, Scott, for maybe students that are travelling up to college, students that have moved up to college as well to a different place. How much of an impact does this have on students' mental health?
It can for some and it can for others, but equally those who might not be commuting that much can also have an impact too. So for any any particular student, obviously it's really important for students to look after their own mental health when they're attending college. And some of the tips I would give on this piece would be, being active in terms of participating, attending college, attending your orientation, going onto the campus if it's possible, to engage, in terms of the program, the societies and the clubs that are on offer. And I think just to add what Claire was saying, I think there's a really important message I'd love to say to the people who are listening today. The student space, student life was taken away from them in a sense from the year before that we would traditionally understand it. And I would like to challenge those students who are coming on campus to reclaim it now, to occupy that student space. Look at what was maybe, where were the gaps in your life over the last year? And maybe there was a social aspect. So this is a chance to really take on that new hobby, that new society, that new club, that new grouping where you can meet like-minded people. And the importance about that connection is that it provides a sense of purpose, feeling part of something, feeling heard or seen, being understood, and belonging. In each of the colleges across this country, there's a sense of pride when you leave or graduate from that college, whether it's from the university, from the ITs or the TUs that are there. It's really important that not only are you coming out with the degree, but you're also coming out with a community of people who have that. Now, just to touch base about the transition piece, just to go on that as well, because I think that's important. There's a piece about also when students are transitioning to college and they're commuting up and obviously doing that social aspect and re-engaging with the college life. It's important that they have priorities, learning to say no. We don't have to say yes to everything, prioritizing their sleep, managing maybe not to go to every social activity, managing external stimulus that we might have in terms of alcohol or other kind of pieces that are there. Just kind of taking a little check-in and a pause with that, just to know that you're not overwhelming yourself or overcommitting yourself, because that can have a knock-on impact as well. So it's about pacing, taking your time to adjust. Like each semester is full of 12 weeks and it's a 9-month period. So it's plenty of time. And just because at the start of the year, and I think it's a really important piece, if you feel you miss the boat or you miss the bus, that doesn't happen. The train or the bus or the boat is going to stop at the next stop and you'll be able to get on it. You haven't missed anything if you haven't got a chance to engage in the first few weeks or the first while, because there's plenty of opportunities to do that. And also later on in your college life, it could be second year, third year, or your final year when you decide to engage and to do that. So it's really important just to mention that. And of course, if people are feeling that sense of overwhelmingness or transitioning or just not feeling it hard to adjust and to work with this new life in a sense that's kind of going to be embarking for many young people, is that there are really good support services who are specialists in supporting students and their mental health and to guide them through it. And you don't need to feel like that you have to have this major crisis to access a service. In my clinical practice, I have worked with people from a variety of issues in their lives. And it's not about people judging whether it's big or small or what's justifiable to go to the counselling service. It's actually about what your experience and how it's impacting on your day-to-day life. And if that is impacting on you or having a negative drawback, come to us. And that's the big piece I would be saying to people as well in terms of their transition. I hope that's kind of useful or helpful.
And Padraig, I want to pose my last question to you. Not all students are going over to level 8, and maybe some might be quite upset about this. For students that are maybe going to further education, doing a level 6 or level 7, what would your advice be to them in settling into their new life as well?
I mean, the first thing is that it is different from school because you are changing. There is a big element of self-direction there involved as well. And the transition to further education and the transition to higher education are somewhat similar in that you will be taught in a different way, but you certainly will be examined in a different way. Not everything will have been reliant largely on the terminal examination, like the Leaving Cert of 2 years ago. You would have sat in a room with no one around you for 2 hours doing an exam. What happens in the PLC program will be a mix of modules that people will take that will involve assessment, working in groups, working on projects, etc. And it is very good preparation, we found from the studies that have been done, for a move on to higher education, because it approximates what someone will do in higher education in terms of self-learning, but also the mix of tasks that you're expected to do as well. So what you find out then as well is within a year, if you finish your level, your level 5 program or go on to for level 6 program, is that you can find out and transition and say, yes, I would love to go to college. But you also might find, well, this is really all I want to do, and this isn't what I want to do. And you haven't wasted or have the challenge of spent a first year in college. So, I mean, there are a lot more pathways out there. There are a lot more pathways from further into higher education. The Minister is very anxious to have a much more integrated system. As you know, we've expanded the apprenticeship system. People should understand that apprenticeships go up to and can go up to level 10. There are a lot of level 8 apprenticeships out there, which are degree level apprenticeships that will allow people, who it suits better, who want to earn and learn. So there's huge variety and choice out there, and the system is much more permeable to moving in and out than it may have been. You're not going down cul-de-sacs anymore.
That's it for this year's Going to College podcast series, and I want to thank my guests Clare Austick, Nóirín Deady, Scott Ahearn and Dr. Padraig Walsh for joining me on this week's episode. Don't forget you can listen and subscribe to the series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Independent.ie or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Ola Majekodunmi. Thanks for listening and very best of luck to all students starting out your college journey.
The Going to College Education Podcast, in association with Quality and Qualifications Ireland, QQI, promoting quality and accountability in Irish education and training.